For the bovine head demo, I'm going to start out with a profile view of a cow. And again, capturing that triangular-like shape. Right there, I'm going to pull the neck down too. There's the bottom of the jaw. The top of the skull right there. And I'll go into the eye first. Find the orbit of the eye. There's the temporalis region. Here's the masseter muscle. I'm thinking already about the zygomaticus. There's a swish that pulls the head up a little bit on a cow, and I want to capture that. For the ear, you use a larger cylinder-like shape. I'll go into the eye really quick, get a little bit of attitude in this sketch. Pull down the neck, again, where it attaches to the back of the head. I'm going to pull in a few of those neck muscles on this sketch as well. Here is the split of the masseter on the cow and the nose. You can think again, a comma shape. And it opens up, and I want to capture those plane changes in the nose right there. And a very flat mouth structure. And I want you to think of, what does this animal do? It grazes. It has a very flat mouth structure. And the horse as well. If you think of a giraffe, it has a very pointy mouth structure. It's eating leaves. So you have a little bit of the form follows function right there in animals. So again, back to the neck, thinking of some of those muscle structures and the attachment of some of those muscles. Here we have the brachiocephalicus. For the ear, I'm going to again flower it out. And cows have larger ears, and they're quite round as well. Here's the section of the temporalis muscle above the zygomaticus. And I'm going to make sure that the ear is really connected to that part of the skull. The ear hole actually lies where the movement point of the jaw is. I showed you that last week. It's very close to that point. Jump around and add a little bit more information. There's that zygomaticus near the mouth. Again, overlapping, allowing more overlap between the mouth structure and the jaw. And clarify the brachiocephalicus a little bit more on the cow. Open up the ear, pull a little bit of hair down, and break up some hair on this gal right here. And get some darker edges, line weight, so the drawing has a little bit more clarity. Pulling in some muscle direction right there. The masseter and the direction of that muscle. Sternocephalicus and of course the brachiocephalicus. And back to the masseter. I'm going to pull up the profile of the cow in the corner here. And what I'm going to do is quarter that cow towards. I'm going to start out with the basic shape of the head. Really scribbling in that triangular-like shape. And I'm already thinking about the form of this animal. I'm starting to place some points that we've discussed. There you go, the kite shape or coffin shape, quite wide on the cow. I'm going to think where the horns lie on this animal. Place the cylinder-like shapes for the eyes right there. Just the nose is a very box-like shape on the cow. Again, this is a grazing animal. It's a very flat nose. And I'm going to sketch that in really quick. I'm going to pull it over a little bit. The ears were, I don't want the ears going off the page or off the picture plane right here. Now here's the masseter. There's the zygomaticus. And I'm going to find the nose, the line for the nostrils. For the eye, I'm going to do the same approach as the horse. Think of the ball shape inside of the eye socket. And not just draw it flat, I'm going to think also of the angle between, again, the tear duct and the back of the eye for this animal. Cows do have a horizontal pupil, just like the horse. Make sure I get that cheek in there. I don't want it to be too fat. I was really having a hard time with that section. It's the zygomaticus of the cow. And I'm going to split the angle of the mouth right there. Kind of a triangular-like shape for the upper part of the mouth. So I break up the box a little bit more, again going general to specific. And for the nose, as you can see, I have a nice line to help guide me so the nostrils aren't kind of floating. And they're comma-like shape, and I'm going to open it up. Get a little bit more detail in the eye right there. Make sure the eye line is nice and solid. Thinking about the temporalis muscle on the skull and some of those neck muscles as well. Now I mentioned this before, cows they're fat, but they're skinny at the same time. They're great models to learn from when it comes to animal drawing. But they do have a bit of fat underneath the neck, that fatty dewlap, and I've mentioned that before. Just keep that in mind when working with cows. Here's the ear, and flowering it out. And I'm going to the other side as well. Is that masseter? Pulling in a little bit of the neck muscle there, but decided not to. Making sure that ear is attached to the side of the head right there. Darkening up the pupil. getting a bit of fur on the ear. The ears of some cows are incredibly furry. They have a lot of hair on that. Think about the Scottish Highland cattle. The nasal region up into the frontal, right there. Darken up the nostril. And get that chin. So I'm going to jump around a little bit. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the structure of the cow and its head. Just putting a little bit more information so the entire structure does feel like it has form. So using those 3D axes or the surface lines can really help you with that. Directional mark making also. I'm going to speed this section of the demo up a little bit more. And what I'm doing here is just reinforcing the form with directional mark making, surface lines, the 3D axis, and some hatching and cross hatching. Just going to move around and make sure that things are clear and pull in some line weight. So I pull some of the animal's skull forward. That temporalis back there, masseter. Zygomaticus right there. Make sure there's a nice overlap, again, between the jaw and the mouth structure. Get some hair in that ear. And I'm going to put in a little bit of grass. Maybe she's chewing on it right now. Alright, for the muscle structure, I'm going to go in again and make sure that the masseter has some color to it and also directional mark making. There we go. Moving with the form of the muscle. And that will initially help you find the form when you're rendering out, say, the fur of the cow's head or its body. The muscles really help you with that. They guide you with that. So darkening up the masseter here, making sure it's connected in the right area. There is the zygomaticus, just clarifying it a tiny bit. And the temporalis right up there. So you can see on the other side of the cow's skull, I can't see it. The horse, on the other hand, you can see it. Cows have a big skull. They have a very big section up there. Again, they have horns. Just going to pull in the direction of that temporalis. And here is the zygomaticus. Pulling it down from under the eye. And clarifying the ear, I didn't want to lose that, even though I was coloring in the temporalis. It's the zygomaticus again. Getting a little bit of the neck muscles in there, kind of jumping around. And shadow in the nose. Again, a very box-like nose. So I can play around with some of that shadow. Getting some more detail on the nose right there. And moving around the cow's head. Just a note that the caninus does, of course, exist on the cow. It does dilate the nostrils, pulling it rearward, but it isn't as prominent like it is on the horse, so I left that out. So for the cow demo, I already scribbled out the Ankoli Watusi, And I'm going to construct this big boy. I'm going to start out with the head. And the horns angle up a little bit on this particular breed of cow. I'm going to think about that kite shape or coffin shape of the top of the skull there. And pull around the jaw. And get that nice box-like shape for the nose. Make sure that it is in alignment to the other side right there. I'm going to pull in the cylinder for the ear, and of course the horns are a cylinder shape. Here are the nostrils. I mentioned before, some cattle have a lot of fat, and this big boy has a fatty dewlap, so I'm going to keep that in mind. I'm going to pull in the tombstone shape, pull down to the elbow right there, and split that in the middle, that tombstone shape. It's nice and big on this cow. Pull it in on the other side right there. Think about the spine of the scapula, and of course the spine, cervical vertebrae itself. There's the information of the scapula, just a guide for me. Pulling the body back, again, cylinder shape. There's the ilium. And pulling back to the ischium right there, thinking also of the greater trochanter, that angle down on the pelvis, kneecap. Pulling in on the other side, and finding the bottom of the box. I'm going to find that cylinder shape attached to the pelvis, and clarify the tombstone shape right here. Here's the cervical vertebrae. Jumping back to the horns, I want to make sure they are, yeah, there we go, that the perspective is correct on it. And he's chewing on some grass again. just wanted to add that in there. I'm going to put in the neck on the tombstone shape, but you'll notice later I pull down the pit of the throat a little bit farther. I want to keep that in mind when I am drawing cattle. For the construction shape of the cow, this works. Here's the leg attached to the tombstone shape here. Again, I'm thinking about the wrist, knuckle, and then the toes. Pulling it on the other side, even though I have the information of the fatty dewlap there. Pulling the tombstone shape, split it down the middle. Here's the other leg. Make sure I get the perspective of that hoof correct. Try again. Alright, and to the back, where the box-like shape for the pelvis is. There's the angle of the ankle. Pull in the tarsus, metatarsus, and the phalanges right here. And of course on the other side too. For the tail, I do want it whipping out a little bit. So there's a bit of action to the back end, and the tail isn't just hanging down. This is the ischium. Clarifying some regions and checking that to make sure it looks nice and solid. I'm going to erase the horn right there so I can place the muscles on top. I'm going to indicate the pit of the throat. As you can see, it's further down. Head of the humerus. The scapular region right there. Down into the elbow. Top of the head. The zygomatic arc. And the back of the jaw. Here's the ilium, kneecap, ischium. It's the wrist. Pulling down into the metacarpus and phalanges. And in the back, the ankle, metatarsus, and the phalanges as well. And on to the muscles of the bull right here. We have the trapezius. I'm going to start with that, thinking about the alignment with the spine of the scapula right here, and get some of that direction. I'm going to pull it up a little bit more. Again, the bull, like this guy right here, he's actually quite round compared to the cow. For the next muscle is the brachiocephalicus, again, arm to head muscle. Pull over that nice tombstone shape and over the head of the humerus. On the other side as well, into the arm right there. I'm going to think about the pectoralis muscles. Pull them down a little bit over the tombstone shape. I want them to really stick out. There's the pectoralis on the back side. Here we have it underneath. Again, attaching to the arm region right there. Now, these two muscles, I grouped them up as the sternocephalicus. You have the purple one, which is the sternomastoid. Let's start with that. And then I'm going to go into the sternomandibularis. This one coming down right here. And I will clarify this in the coloring demo. But these two muscles actually overlap one another on a cow. So it's a very fine detail. And I wanted to capture that in this demo. And I want to, of course, capture the sternocephalicus on the other side. There's the trachea, and I'm going to pull down the sternocephalicus right there. All right, directional mark making. Clarify that area, and the brachiocephalicus as well. Now, just a note right there, some cows are very fatty and have a hump, so keep that in mind. Right here, I'm going to indicate the amnotransversarius. Again, I grouped that up on the horse with the brachiocephalicus. Get that nice belly in there on the cow. Indicate a little bit of that stifle fold. Jump around and render some directional mark making out with these muscles. There's that trap right there. And the deltoids. Quite large on the cow. It's the triceps in the back. This guy's taking weight on this leg, so I'm going to bulge that up. Yeah, right there. Make it nice and dark. And pull that up towards the head of the humerus. And think about the position of those deltoids as well. It's the extensors. Making sure I'm getting the form of those muscles. Pulling in more direction on the triceps and the deltoids back here. Back of the leg, thinking also the bony landmark and the flexor. Some more direction in the pecs back there. And up into the sternocephalicus. Clean that up a tiny bit. Next up is the latissimus dorsi. Again, thinking about the cylinder shape of the body, abdomen area on this animal. So there's some form to that muscle when I draw it. The obliques. And that stifle fold, I'm going to pull that up. Here's some skin that comes down. Again, I'm drawing a bull, so I want to capture that. And there's that fatty dewlap. Nice and big on this guy. I'm gonna now go into that forearm. I don't want to forget that. It's the wrist region. Pull in some of those flexors and extensors. Clarify the foreleg right here, and there's that dew claw, and split that toe. These are cloven-toed animals, so I want to make sure I get that. Same thing, split it down the middle, and as you can see, I started out with that horse hoof and just broke it down in the middle, like I went through last week. Latissimus dorsi, directional mark making. The obliques up here. And then on into the back. I placed in the greater trochanter and am going to place that glute in there. It's placed right on top of that pelvic region. Now on the cow, I have the gluteobiceps. And this is only on the cow. It is the bicep femoris fused with the rear portion of the gluteus superficialis. So keep that in mind when you're drawing the cow. That's why I indicated it to be green on this chart. Here is the tensor fascia. Nice and big on this guy. And pulling in directional mark making right there. It's the gluteobicep. And that back one is the semitendon. I'm pulling that tail again. I want to whip that around. Maybe he's shooing some flies away. The muscles here of the leg. Thinking about the extensors coming down. And there's the Achilles tendon and the gastrocnemius right here. Want to make sure that gluteobiceps bulging out a little bit because of that gastro muscle. Going down into the feet. There you go, cloven that toe out, split it. And indicate some of the information on the inside of the leg right there. And that back leg too. Get those feet some dew claws. And a little bit more direction on the muscles. For the head, I'm going to go in and clarify the top of the skull right here. Really get a nice cylinder shape for the horns. I'm going to leave those out right now and move into the eyes. Capture those cylinder shapes where the eyes are placed on the head. There's the eye itself. Again, I want to angle that down, and that's where the ear would lie. The box-like shape for the nose. And capture that masseter right there. Angle it up. And a little bit of directional mark making. There's the zygomaticus. the nose, again thinking of a comma-like shape. Moving back up into the eyes and the horn right here. And making sure that those horns are going to be in proportion to one another. Or in the same perspective, I should say. This is the nose, and I'm going to open up the mouth a little bit. Maybe he's chewing on that grass and moving around. Thinking of that horn, and that temporalis is going to be behind that horn, okay? I want to make sure that that is a prominent feature on this big boy. Add a little bit of shadow so the head overlaps the neck. And get some information in those extensors back there in the back leg. On into the colors again, just to reinforce some of the muscle structure and also the direction of the muscles. I'll start out with the head. Here's the masseter and going into the zygomaticus. Again, that temporalis lying behind the horn. A bit more information in that eye, directional mark making. Nostril right there, and the mouth structure. On into the brachiocephalicus, long muscle extending down from the head to the arm. Here's the trapezius. Coloring it in, again using the directional mark making. There's the spine of the scapula. I wanted to fix that up again. Making sure it's in the middle of that trapezius. Going into the brachiocephalicus again, pulling in the muscle direction. Moving it down into the inside of the arm right there. And darkening up that direction on the muscles. Here's the omnotrans muscle, the green one I was discussing earlier. And on into the sternocephalicus. This is the sternomastoid, the purple color. And you can see there, I'm going to place it so it is being overlapped by the sternomandibilaris muscle. That green one. And then they are overlapping each other on the other side. Pectoralis. Making sure I get that direction. Back into the neck muscles here. Get that trachea clarified. You can see how much of that fat really adds to that cow's neck. Nice and fatty there, that dewlap. But keep in mind that those muscles are underneath that. going in and again making the muscles nice and shiny. It's the deltoids. Pulling in the highlight right there. And darkening that up. Again, directional mark making going towards the head of the humerus. Here are the triceps. Nice and big on these guys. Pulling that nice highlight there. Add a little bit more direction to that structure and get that shadow behind the tricep. I want to start thinking about that. Extensors. Moving down into the direction of the wrist. On into the latissimus dorsi, the blue one right here. Again, thinking about that cylinder shape, the basic shape of the cow, and moving in that direction when drawing this muscle and the direction of the muscle. Pull that out a little bit more. And there we go, add the highlight. Serratus ventralis, and here we have the portion of the oblique. And pull that up and move in the direction. Really get that direction. There we go. Get the top of the back there. And the belly. Here's the stifle fold. That triangular-like shape, nice and yellow. And clean up those obliques a little bit more. Keep in mind that those loins are influencing the surface. Pull in a highlight with the obliques. And darken it up a little bit. Getting the shadow in the tricep and back into the pecs. I want to make sure those are nice and clarified. On into the glute right here. And the the tensor fascia. It's going into a green color there. It's the tensor fascia. Pull in that direction. And get the direction of the tensor fascia moving into the kneecap. Add a highlight. Make sure there's nice form to that muscle. And then here is the gluteobicep. Semitendon. Cow is quartering away a tiny bit, not as dramatic as the horse. So I'm going to see a little bit of that guy. And getting the gluteobicep clarified, the directions. There we go. Nice highlight to really pull that out. Moving in the direction of the stifle apparatus. And here are the extensors of the back leg. Thinking of the gastrocnemius influencing the surface form. Pulling in a highlight for the extensors. And darkening up some areas on this cow. The stomach, back leg, even into the tail. Thinking about some surface lines, clarifying some regions. Get that extensor region right there. Don't want to forget the foreleg. Really darkening up that tricep. Pulling in the hoof region. There's that shadow behind the tricep. And pulling in a little bit of that ground plane. Again, I don't want this cow just kind of floating around. He's not a magical cow. On to the horns. I can finally place my horns in. So again, horns, just think of a cylinder shape and be sure to draw through. Think of the other side of them. And clarify those horns, pull up some directional mark making, and also thinking of the 3D axis. And I'm going to erase out the muscle portion right here of the neck and place that ear in. Again, there's my nice cylinder shape, and I'm going to flower it out right there. And of course on the other side too. Clarify the horns a little bit more and erase the muscle structure out. Get a little bit more information in the face. I don't want to leave that area out. Again, it's one of those places I really focus on when I draw an animal. I think it's very important to how successful the sketch or the drawing is. Even a painting of an animal. It's the ground plane. Open up those toes really quick. Make sure I got my dew claws on there. Clarify and darken up some regions around the muscles. Horns again. And the pecs. There's the forearm. And make sure there's a nice shadow between the neck and the head, so the head is pulling forward. All right, so I'm going to do a quick demo. Again, if you only have photographs, flip the photograph when you're drawing it, so you can practice drawing from your head. Don't just copy straight out of a photograph. I'm going to keep saying that for the remainder of the course. If you can go to a zoo, fantastic. If you can go to a horse ranch or even some cattle ranches around your town, awesome. I'd highly recommend you try that. Especially for this course, you're going to get a lot out of just watching the animal too. So I'm going to go in and capture the gesture here. And of course, starting to place in the basic shapes we've talked about. And I chose a deer. Get away from the equine and bovine group really quick. And this is a white-tailed buck, and he's licking a branch. They do that during the rut season. So I'm going to pull in that box back there. Make sure I got the tombstone shape and attach the neck. And make sure the antlers are in perspective. Just to add a little bit of character, I'm going to add that little branch he's licking. Pull up that back a little bit more. Make sure it doesn't come down too far. Just checking the surface form. And here are the antlers. Attach the legs to that tombstone shape. Get the pelvic region in there and draw through the box. Make sure I find the other side. Attach those legs and find that ground plane right there. Going to clarify the legs a little bit more. Again, a cylinder-like shape. I'm going to pull back that hoof right there. Here's the chest region. Pull in a cylinder shape so I can get the perspective of the deer. And there's that stifle fold. Pulling the back legs here, again clarifying that region. I'm going to swish out the tail a little bit. Maybe he's getting excited about licking that branch right there. Pulling a little bit of hatching to clarify the form. And more information in the head right here. I'm going to pull out his tongue a little bit. So for antlers, any type of horn, you can think of the Slinky drawing to help you with the 3D form. And as you can see, I started out with the entire idea of the antler first, and then I'm going in and pulling out the tines right there. Erase that Slinky sketch. But I'm attaching the tines to that cylinder shape and not drawing from point A to point B to point C. I really think about the entire set of antlers. Get those dew claws in this guy. And jump around and just clarify some regions, especially those feet right there. Woo! Okay, so for your homework this week, 20 construction shaped drawings. You can focus on the unguligrade animals, equine, bovine. If you want to draw a deer, if you want to draw a giraffe, go ahead. Feel free to add the muscle draw overs if you feel like it. This is optional for this week. If you need to just focus on getting the construction shapes down, drawing through the animal, that is fine. If you want to try a couple muscle drawovers, go ahead, feel free. I'm leaving it up to you. Grasp the foundations before you put more complexity into the drawing. That is all I ask. So you can do drawings such as the deer right here, or the cow in Koliwatusi I did, or feel free to do a simple muscle draw over like the horse. If you want to add color, feel free. Again, the muscle drawovers are optional. For the construction shapes, post your best 5. I also want to see 5 more pages from your sketchbooks of the basic shapes. Post your best page. Until next week, ciao!